Out of the bloody, gloomy sky, rain was falling, washing the blood on the bodies of the fallen warriors. They lay on the white ground, comrades and foes alike. A guy stood in the middle of this hell, leaning on his blade. His clothes were torn, his body covered in wounds, and his forehead was bleeding. The rain added to the drama of it all. All around there were bloodied and breathless corpses. Death had spared no one, whether friend or foe. The boy raised his head, not looking happy to have survived. He felt depressed and angry, knowing many of his comrades had died without seeing the result of their efforts, paid for with their lives. With bitterness in his voice, the guy spoke, raindrops dripping down his face. Someone's voice broke the silence, asking if he was still alive with hatred and anger. Turning towards the voice, the boy saw a giant with white skin, wings and horns covered in wounds and cuts. He was from the Ahayut clan of giants, who had wreaked havoc in the empire for unknown reasons. Climbing on top of the giant, standing on his chest with a blade in his hand, the boy asked why the culprit of all these deaths was still alive. The giant replied that the boy need not worry, as he would be gone for a long time, and the Ahayut clan would return to their homeland. The boy sarcastically mentioned that his friends who died before the giant would be waiting for him. Confused, the giant asked about these friends. The boy reminded him that one had died at the claws of a ravaged red dragon, and the other had been sealed forever by an old man named Lorehorn. The boy mocked the giant but got a cold response, as the giant told him not to hide the truth. The giant explained that star children could share feelings with each other, and that their enemy had been destroyed with him. The boy's face turned bitter, realizing the giant was telling the truth. He knew that such strong men were no longer there. "I'm still alive. So what are you talking about?" the boy said, trying not to sound weak. The giant told him not to deceive himself, knowing their time was coming to an end. He added that if the boy had realized his talent earlier and devoted himself to training, he could have been a huge obstacle to their long-held desire. Struggling with his emotions, the boy replied that he knew he had lived a disgusting life. The giant told him to shut up and die, calling him a great man, even though it made no sense, for it was the end of their world, swallowed up by starlight, about to disappear. Those were the giant's last words. Since the guy couldn't listen to him anymore, since what the giant said was the truth, which the guy didn't want to accept, he struck with his sword. The giant's head separated from his body. Then it fell to the ground with a clatter. He spat in the blue blood that flowed out of it. The boy stared pensively at the ground, where raindrops dripped on puddles of blood and water. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't do anything about things that had already happened. Stepping into the bloody puddle, breathing hard from fatigue and being morally broken, he started walking. Tears came to his eyes, or maybe they were just raindrops running down his face. But that wasn't the important thing. He began to remember the first days of the war when he and his comrades were in the camp. When he first met a jolly fellow with whom they later became best friends. He remembered their fun times with the other soldiers, and their first mission when they couldn't even imagine what it would come to. In front of the guy was the breathless body of his best friend, which had been stabbed with a sword. The pain he had experienced before his death was reflected on his face. "Were you all here?" the boy asked in a distressed voice, looking at the mountain of corpses that consisted of his comrades, with whom he fought shoulder to shoulder. "What kind of pride made you fight until you died? Did you think you all were strong because—" the boy asked, knowing he wouldn't get an answer. "Dash, you stupid bastards," said the guy, trying to hide the hell that was going on in his soul behind that mask. Covering his best friend's eyes with his hand, he told him that he should have realized the situation and run away, then with warmth in his words, called him stupid. The guy, lamenting, didn't understand why on the giants, who were able to reflect the aura of the Empire's strongest sword, his sword was the only one that was able to damage them. And if it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have had to stand on the front line and die first, the guy said with bitterness in his voice. He just stared at the ground, realizing he couldn't change anything and not knowing what to do. He was all alone, but then he heard a very quiet, barely audible voice asking if someone was here. The boy excitedly turned toward the voice, which weakly added that he couldn't move because of his injuries. "Where are you?" The guy leaned on his sword and slowly stood up, then began to move slowly toward the voice that kept calling for help. When he came to the call for help, there was a girl sitting, leaning against a rock. "Adashan, you really survived," the guy said in disbelief. "Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. Who is the best Manhwa swordsman?" Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out. Now, back to the recap. Commander Adeshan. Blood was dripping from the girl's arm, which was missing at the elbow, but she was still alive. From the look in her eyes, she was still alive. Biting his lip, the boy headed towards the commander. For someone who has command? What is this? Approaching the commander, the boy asked. Aren't you a corporal? The woman pushed forward with her burning question. Is the giant dead? Ronan answers with a yes, and that his body isn't too far from where they are now. Thank you, Corporal Ronan, said the captain, tears streaming from her eyes. Ronan continued to stare at the commander, tears streaming down her face. Face smiling, he turned to the commander, indicating that if she was so grateful to him, she could listen to his request. It surprised the girl as she sat down opposite him. Ronan explained that he would like the disciplinary soldiers who were usually treated poorly to be shown kindness this time. The commander replied uncertainly, mentioning that since he seemed more alive than she was, maybe he should take care of them himself the way he wanted to. Gosh, how could I? He said, starting to cough. The commander stared at him in surprise, pointing at the blood on his palm. She asked the girl, Is this what it means to be more alive? Looking at the blood on his hand as if he had already accepted it, he added that he could die any second. I was fooling around most days, so I couldn't do much. So it feels unfair that I'm going to die, he said to the captain, who was silently listening to him. When she heard his words, she asked him what he wanted to do if he survived. He replied with a smile on his face, I have many things I want to do, but the only thing I can think of right now, he said, raising his gaze to the sky. What's it like to go to the academy? Ronan asked thoughtfully and with interest in his voice. The commander was surprised by his question, not understanding what it was about in this situation. He explained to the commander that the words said by the giant didn't leave him alone, but more importantly, it was the wish of his late sister who wanted him to enter the academy. But soon, I will be reunited with my family, he said in a melancholy voice, already resigned to death. The commander tried to give him hope, saying that when the rain ends, the search party would come, but she didn't finish her sentence as Ronan interrupted her, saying that he was already lost and had no more sense or desire to live on. He asked the girl not to continue saying useless things because it seemed to him that nothing in this world could awaken in him the desire to continue to fight and not give up. Having lost everything he held dear, against the bloody sky, there were black burnt trees that blended well into the picture. The sun appeared in the cloudy sky, illuminating the battlefield, and the rain stopped. The last drop of rain fell to the ground, and the eyes of the boy and the girl widened as if this drop was the beginning of something. The rain stopped, the boy said in surprise. The captain was also surprised by the sudden cessation of the storm. But suddenly, the earth was shaken by a massive earthquake that neither of them expected. Ronan, looking in the direction from which the tremor had come, his eyes widened with both surprise and horror. In front of him, in the air, was a giant with 8 wings that emitted a majestic aura. Behind him, there were many other giants who appeared to be warriors, waiting for their commander's orders. Ronan and the commander first wondered where they had all come from. The commander was terrified and desperate, as the 3 giants they had defeated at the cost of all the soldiers' lives were only the beginning of what they would have to overcome. The commander was flooded with memories in which someone said that he could not save the world a 3rd time, and that there was one last chance left. She was pulled from her thoughts by Ronan's voice, calling out to her, telling her to come to her senses. Then, in an irritated voice, he told her to get a hold of herself and use her telekinesis to throw him into the air, since he couldn't reach them with his sword from here. The commander, on the other hand, having lost all hope, didn't understand the guy who, seeing all this, wanted to keep fighting. Ronan asked the commander if she was just going to sit back and do nothing. Drawing his sword, he said in a confident voice that, even if he died, he would have to finish off at least a couple of those monsters who were responsible for all their misfortunes. Swinging his sword furiously and unwaveringly, the commander was genuinely impressed by the guy's fortitude, who didn't give up even in a situation where the only outcome for them was death. Looking at Ronan, whose face showed hatred, anger, and complete steadfastness, the girl realized that the guy was just like that, and thanks to him, they were able to reach this stage. Looking at the guy's broad back that didn't sag even under the countless troops in front of him, Corporal Ronan, she said in a firm voice to the guy who turned to her in bewilderment at her voice, asking what was wrong. I'm busy, so stop talking. But he couldn't finish because the commander, standing up on her feet, leaned her lips on the guy's, who was surprised at the unexpected turn and who didn't realize what was happening. was quite romantic being on death's doorstep. They kissed before their last fight. But it wasn't as you might think. The commander handed a blue glowing sphere with her mouth, which the guy swallowed and then asked in surprise. "What is it?" Ronan asked. The girl leaned over to him and whispered something in his ear. "What? Wait, what are you?" asked the guy in bewilderment, trying to understand what the commander meant. But she just continued to tell him something. The girl, who could barely stand on her feet, standing with her arm around the guy, Corporal Ronan. She said in a serious voice to the guy who was perplexed by her harsh tone. Then, in a soft voice that no longer read her harsh commander's tone, she asked Ronan that if the lights met again, would he tell her not to do anything stupid and become a tailor, adding to the boy standing before her in confusion that she had done a lot of things but nothing that she wanted to. She added with the brightest smile the guy had ever seen on her face. The boy continued to stand silently, looking at his commander. At the same time, in the hand of the giant with 8 wings, a light began to form, which the next second exploded, consuming everything around it. A blue sphere of light bending through space, moving through time. Ronan opened his eyes and then jumped up in a panic, calling for his commanding officer, but no one answered. He was stunned by the scene in front of him. The place he was in was radically different from where he had been before. The bloody battlefield was gone, and in front of him was a green plain illuminated by the bright sun. "This is impossible," he muttered, not believing his eyes. "This place, it must be." "This shocked the boy," he said, looking around, rising to his feet. He realized where he got this strange feeling. This place was familiar to him after all. This was his hometown, where he was born and raised. Not believing what was happening, the boy wondered. Sitting under the tree, Ronan tried to come to his senses and decide what to do next. Remembering the commander's parting words to her, he began to wonder if they were true. Memories of that time flashed before his eyes when the commander handed him the blue orb, saying that what he had just swallowed was an orb capable of turning back time, adding that this was how, as a tailor, she was able to become a wobbly commander. She also added that the orb only allowed 4 regressions, 3 of which she had already used, so Ronan only had 1 chance. And she's giving it to him because he has the power to kill giants, adding that she believes he was the key to stopping the destruction of this world. She also told him to hone his skills, and she's glad he has the will to do so, to which he remembered the words he said. He replied that he was just talking nonsense. The commander ignored his excuses and told him that if he wanted to hone his skills, he should go to Philian Academy since it was the most suitable place to do so. There were many wonderful people there who could help him do so. After which she gently turned to Ronan, saying with a bright smile on his face that if they ever saw each other again, he could tell her not to do anything stupid and become a tailor, telling the confused and uncomprehending guy that she had done a lot of things in her life. As Ronan replayed the memories in his head, he cursed. Then he started banging his head against a tree under the stares of passing men, not believing it was real and wishing he could wake up. Then he began to scream loudly, wondering what he should do, even if he could get into the past, because now he had no money or influence to change anything. But then the realization came to him that it was indeed the past, and it was real. So Ronan picked up a stick from the ground and headed for the tree. He could see his older sister, after which he ran with all his legs towards home, running down the street of his childhood hometown. He was overwhelmed with emotion and nostalgia. He finally realized that he had returned to the village, happy at the opportunity to meet his sister. He continued to run, knowing that if he ran a little more, he would be able to see his sister, whom he had not seen for many years and whom he missed so much. But suddenly, his eyes caught on something. He saw a group of boys hanging another boy by their feet, and the poor boy was helpless in the air. He wondered what those bullies wanted by hanging the boy off the ground. He turned to leave, muttering to himself that these guys hadn't changed. But then he remembered, isn't this the moment a child wizard would appear? A strong and valuable warrior like her who would become one in the future was very rare in the battlefield, especially here in the suburbs. He also remembered that around the same time, something would happen that would change everything. In front of the group of boys, a pink-haired girl about their age appeared. She was very shy, afraid to say anything to the boys, but even more worried about the child hanging on the tree, because something bad might happen to him. Deciding to act, she bowed her head to the boys, asking them to stop. The boy hanging from the tree continued crying and shouting that he really didn't have any more money. He added that it was because this month, the medicine for his mom was very expensive. but the leader of the gang ignored his cries and patted him on the cheek. He turned to the girl, asking her what she wanted them to do to the boy. Then he turned to the hanging boy with a snide smile, asking why he should worry about his mother's health since all he needed from him was some money. "If you want to be a good boy," said the gang leader angrily, swinging his hand at the boy, "you have to earn money," he added, slapping the hanging boy across the face with force as he continued to shout that he had to bring them more money. His cronies grinned and watched from the sidelines, looking as if they were enjoying the situation. The ringleader then called out to the girl, who looked at him fearfully, a blue light hovering around her hands. He told her to use magic to lift the guy up even higher since he didn't understand what they were telling him. She said she couldn't do that because it would end badly, and the leader asked why she was scared. She wasn't the one hanging there, so what difference did it make? The leader told the girl to shut up and pick him up with a clear threat in his voice. He added that if she didn't do it, she would be hung with a guy. Asel thought to herself with horror how it could have come to this, and whether it was right to study magic. After all, she just wanted to show everyone that she could also be good at something. But something somewhere went wrong, deciding to tell the gang that she couldn't do it. She was so afraid tears came to her closed eyes. But gathering all her will in a fist and overcoming her fear, she decided that she must stop all this. Then, in a timid voice, she turned to the leader of the gang, telling them to stop. But suddenly, something hit her from behind with a stick on the head. It was Ronan who was holding the stick and told the girl not to be stupid and to stop because she could kill him, losing her concentration from the blow, though it wasn't strong. She dispelled the magic she was holding the guy's leg with. As a result, he fell to the ground with a thud. The enraged gang leader rushed to the girl, asking what she was doing and did she do it just because the guy said so. Threatening with his fist, he asked if she was mocking him. She answered timidly and fearfully that she had not done it on purpose. But her apology was interrupted by Ronan, who stood in front of her and told her not to worry about trash like that leader. He told her to listen to him, and she stared at him in surprise, not understanding what was going on. Ronan said he had something to say to her, but he was interrupted by the ringleader who didn't like what was going on. Being ignored, he called Ronan a bastard. Ignoring the ringleader's outraged shouts, Ronan casually asked Asel where she had learned telekinesis magic. She timidly replied that she had learned it from a grimoire she had bought from the street. Ronan was amazed at what she could accomplish by studying such a cheap grimoire on her own. He reflected that it was truly amazing, but the further he went, the more he would learn, and with that, he would be able to catch up with the giants. Unable to stand being ignored, the leader of the boys drew his sword from its sheath, the one he carried with him. Hearing a painfully familiar sound, Ronan looked toward the boy who had drawn the blade. He was standing in a fighting stance with a furious look on his face, asking the guy and the girl how dare they ignore him. "It seems like you're reacting up since you were purposefully lost to you back in the day," the guy said with obvious hatred. He raised his sword and lunged at Ronan, shouting that he would show him his place today. When Ronan saw the sword that was about to cut him in half, he was not frightened but thought about where the bastard had gotten it. Then he analyzed the guy's movements, whose technique was really bad. But he was quite strong, which made up for his clumsy technique, but it wouldn't work against him. Anyway, with a casual movement, he easily dodged the gang leader's punch. His forehead was vein with anger, which was caused by Ronan's extraordinary ease in dodging his blow. Ronan thought to himself that, although his body had gotten younger, his skills and reactions hadn't gone anywhere, being the same as when he had been accepted as a disciplined soldier. His fighting sense, which was his talent, and which he had developed throughout his time fighting in the war, remained with him. The leader of the gang, not wanting to show his blunder, laughed, saying that the guy was just lucky, and he just wanted to make sure that he couldn't even lift a spoon for the rest of his life. He replied that he was really lucky today, though it was not always so. For example, all his life, feeling his superiority, the headmaster told Ronan with a sly smile that he would give him a chance if he knelt down and begged him. Then he would not take his life, but he would have to give up his arm. Ronan was angry, even though he was not a 14-year-old child. But even he could not tolerate such an attitude. The leader of the gang, however, was not going to stop, adding with a smirk that if he killed him, he would still treat his sister well. "Did you just say sister?" Ronan questioned the leader. He continued to talk about what he thought every time he saw his sister, and about her figure, but the boy was not to be drawn on what was sacred to Ronan. With a face that held nothing but hatred and anger, Ronan swung the stick he had been holding in his hand all this time. Drops of blood fell to the floor. The leader of the gang stood in a daze, unaware of what had happened, while blood flowed from the area where his left ear should have been. His ear was separated from his head and fell to the ground. His sword fell to the ground. The pain that came after the shock made the guy fall to his knees, screaming in pain. His cronies watched with horror on their faces as their leader writhed in pain. Ronan came closer and called out to the boy in a cold voice, with an intense hatred and anger that gave the ringleader goosebumps and made him unable to move. He asked, "Do you want to die, punk?" The leader of the gang was kneeling before Ronan, who was looking at him with a hard face, while his friends could not believe what had happened, that he had been able to cut off their leader's ear so calmly. They couldn't believe Ronan's skills and that he could so calmly cut off their leader's ear with a simple stick. Turning to the rest of the gang, looking at them, he asked if they were enjoying the show. They were frightened and backed away, glaring angrily at the guy. Then pushing the guy in front of him, who was still kneeling on his knees with his hand to his ear, he told them to get their bastard leader and get out of here if they didn't want to end up like him. He also added that they should leave the money of the guy hanging on the tree, also compensation for his mood. Looking at the bloody stick in Ronan's hands, the boys quickly agreed, not wanting to end up like their leader. After which they left the scene in a hurry, throwing a pouch of his money to the boy hanging on the tree from whom the gang had stolen the money. Ronan said it was his. Taking the pouch, the boy looked at it uncertainly, not believing his eyes. He asked Ronan if he was really giving it to him, because it was more than he had. Ronan replied that it was all right, and that all he needed was the sword that the leader had left behind. He added that he didn't have to worry about the gang anymore since they didn't have the courage to harass him anymore. The boy tearfully thanked Ronan, telling him that he was very grateful and would never forget it. Ronan said it was all right. He didn't need to thank him, and that he could just go home. But then, they heard someone's quiet voice trying to say something uncertainly. It was a pink-haired girl who, in a tentative but sincere voice, apologized to the boy, saying that she knew what she did was wrong and that she shouldn't have done it. Even if the ringleader, whose name was Hans, had threatened her, she tearfully added that she was very scared and didn't know what to do. Then she apologized again, to which the guy replied with a soft smile that she had also cried when Hans first brought her here too. When he saw her, he thought that she was in the same situation as him and had also acted out of her own free will. He put his hand on her shoulder and said that she shouldn't blame herself. After all, it wasn't her fault, the guy said with a bright grin, also saying that he appreciated her apology and then bowed and headed home. Ronan and Asel stayed behind and waved goodbye. Ronan, on the other hand, looked at the girl and noted that she was not bad and looked very innocent. Then he elbowed her, which made her jump in surprise, and told her if she remembered that he had wanted to talk to her earlier. Then turning around and leaving, he added that they should meet here in 4 days. Asel asked Ronan what he meant by that, and he said he was busy right now, and they could meet at night when the moon was in the sky. Then he turned around and drew his sword in an intimidating voice and asked if she knew what would happen if she didn't show up. Then he ran away, leaving the frightened Asel standing in the middle of the clearing. She didn't realize what had happened and what she had gotten herself into. Before we continue, let's take a moment to shout out Janoit 1337, who commented, "I would say Hyenwoo Kim from the tutorial tower of the advanced player," on our one-armed swordsman video. Thanks for commenting. When he arrived at his small but well-kept house, which was surrounded by trees, he stood in front of the entrance, hesitating to go in. He thought it would be too weird to give flowers or not. After all, as he remembered, his sister was very fond of flowers, so he had picked some on the way back, hoping to please her. But now he stood embarrassed in front of the door, not daring to go in. Unable to bear the embarrassment, he went to throw the flowers away. But suddenly he heard a voice opening the door and saying he heard someone outside. Then a woman's voice called out to him, asking if it was him. Ronan froze in place, then slowly turned his head. As a soldier, he thought a lot about what he would say to his sister if he met her again, to apologize for her leaving this world or to say how he missed her. He thought about it so much, but that was all. Only the old Ronan could say. Looking at his sister, who was very beautiful and had long white hair, who greeted him with a bright smile on her face, he knew that all he could say at this moment was, "I'm back. I can't believe I lived to see this day," said the girl, standing by a table full of food and with a happy face, hugging a bouquet of flowers Ronan had given her. "That I would get flowers from my cold little brother," she added, then jumping up and down with a very happy face. She said she was very happy to which the embarrassed boy replied that he was glad she liked it. "My cute little brother. Do you want something else?" the girl began to ask. He, sitting in front of a table full of food and 3 empty bowls, replied that she had already given him enough. Then he casually asked how old the girl would be this year, to which she looked at the guy in surprise and said that she was 22, also asking why he was asking. He replied that he had just suddenly forgotten, but the girl reproachfully said that it was not something that he should forget, as the girl asked Ronan if he had a fever, and if he was all right. He thought that if his sister was 22, he had only 10 years left before the war with the giants. Putting her hand on the boy's forehead, Ural said worriedly that she didn't feel his temperature. Ronan realized that his sister hadn't changed a bit, and was just as he remembered her. But was she even brighter, kinder, and warmer? He thought, sitting on a chair in the cozy kitchen of his home, surrounded by the care of his beloved sister. He couldn't help but wish that this moment would last forever, but to do so, to protect his sister, and what is dear to him, 10 years from now. Taking her hand, which she placed on his head, Ronan suddenly told Ural that he had something to tell her. His sudden words surprised the girl, who asked what he wanted to tell her. "I think I want to go to the academy," Ronan said to his sister with a slight smile on his face. "What academy?" Ural was surprised, not expecting such words from Ronan. Then, coming to her senses and realizing what he said with a glowing face, she grabbed the guy's hand. She began to shake his hand with tears of joy in her eyes, asking him to repeat what he had said, as she couldn't believe it. To which he replied that yes, he really wanted to go to the academy. Then she jumped up and rushed to the room. She started looking for something, saying that she always knew this day would come, calling him smart, and adding that he would be an excellent student. Then she put a big chest in front of the boy, saying it was a gift for him. Ronan looked inside and saw a pile of gold coins that glistened brightly, then asked in surprise how much was there. The girl said she was saving it for a gift for him. She added that she had long ago decided that when Ronan wanted to enter the academy, she would have to be ready and have the money to enter. Ronan was amazed that her sister had managed to raise such money. He said that although he appreciated her efforts and care, he couldn't accept it and wanted her to use it for herself, adding that it wasn't that much to get into the academy, to which she asked why he said that, adding that there was more there than it seemed, then saying she didn't know where Ronan wanted to go, to which he promptly replied that it was the Imperial School of Philian Academy. What? The Imperial School of Philian Academy was the best educational institution of the Empire, which was leading in every aspect, from teaching to having advanced technology. In addition, it was taught by the continent's most outstanding professors and heavily funded by the Imperial family. It was the best place for education, prestigious enough that it could be called a factory of heroes. These heroes reached such high levels only by studying at this academy. Many other outstanding masters came from here. Thinking back to the guys from this academy who had participated in the war and performed very well, Ronan couldn't help but agree with Commander Adashan that this academy could greatly help him in his development. But joining an academy with high standards and insane prices was also a problem, especially for a child from a not-so-rich family. But remembering the reaction of his sister, who believed in him, he decided that he wouldn't let her down and show her the results he was capable of. Confidence and steadfastness reflected in his eyes. When he reached his destination, he turned to the girl who was timidly waiting for him. He didn't expect her to come. Calling her Acel, the girl answered in a timid voice that her name was Acel. She added that she came because the guy said he wouldn't leave her alone if she didn't come, to which he told her to forget it, as they would be very busy today because he wanted to check something with the girl. Ronan threw his bag on the floor. The girl, not understanding anything, asked him what he was talking about, and he pointed his finger at himself. He said that she should use telekinesis on him and lift him up as high as she could. The girl stood there trying to figure out what the guy wanted her to do. Then she asked, "Why would he do something so dangerous?" Ronan replied in a relaxed voice, as if there was nothing dangerous about it, that everything was fine, and that Acel just needed to do what he told her. He assured her that he wouldn't die, and that she shouldn't worry about it. She finally agreed uncertainly, saying that she was starting. What will happen next? Find out next time by staying tuned for our future recaps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great recaps.